There's one thing that mental health professionals and people who are seeking mental health services have in common, and that is their frustration with the mental health stigma that exists, especially here in Kenya and Africa at large, if we're being honest. I think the world as a whole really has a lot of mental health stigma. But I am speaking about Kenya because this is what I am exposed to. It's so difficult offering mental health services to Kenyans because of the mental health stigma. The perceptions we have about mental health, the perceptions we have about mental health suffering, mental health illnesses, people who have mental health problems, they are so defeating. It's like an uphill task just offering the services, because people will even not come to you even when you're offering free services, because they're like afraid of the shame that comes with mental health challenges. And that is a big problem, because then it means the services exist, but the people who need them the most do not access them. And so mental health professionals spend their days lounging. Some of them are unemployed. Some of them have never offered mental health services because there are no people to come and seek these services. And even when you're running a mental health service as a whole, then you struggle a lot more, because the help-seeking behavior in our country is being influenced a lot more by the mental health stigma that exists. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I don't think we talk enough about where this mental health stigma comes from, what it looks like, and we don't talk about how we can deal with the mental health stigma. So this is what this episode will be concerned with. We are going to talk about mental health stigma, the 3 types of mental health stigma that exist. We are going to talk about where mental health stigma comes from, and maybe in another episode we'll talk about how to reduce mental health stigma. And beyond that, I think we'll also get to talk about the myths, the mental health myths that exist. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be addressing. I hope this is a topic that you're curious about, and if you are, please stick around till the end. All right, so what exactly is mental health stigma? Mental health stigma are the negative attitudes, beliefs, and stereotypes that people have about people with mental health conditions. And that I know we have had all the stereotypes that exist and all the attitudes that people have towards people with mental health illnesses. So all those negative stereotypes that we have, all those attitudes we have towards people with mental health illnesses or mental health in general, all of those contribute to mental health stigma. And mental health stigma can manifest itself in 3 forms. Number 1, there's public stigma. So public stigma are these widespread societal beliefs that we have against people who have mental health conditions. It could be the things we say about people with mental health problems, such as people with, let's say, depression are usually sad and they are not reliable because they will not show up to work, because they are just not going to be present. That is public stigma. When people tell us that they have depression, we start treating them differently in that sense. It could be that we say people who have mental illnesses are violent. And so when somebody tells you that they are having a mental health condition of some sort, your first assumption is that this person is going to be violent, even if they're not violent. And anyway, in general, people who have mental health problems are not always violent. That is just a myth, which I'm going to address when we're talking about the mental health myths that exist. So those can be examples of public stigma. With this public stigma, it can lead to discrimination, exclusion, and negative labeling. You can tell when people start putting labels on other people, especially negative labels, these people are likely to be discriminated. So when you tell people that you have a mental illness and they automatically believe that you're violent, then you're going to be discriminated. And you're going to be afraid of telling people when you're suffering because you're afraid of the way they're going to treat you. So that is public stigma. And that is one of the ways that mental health stigma manifests itself. The second way that mental health stigma manifests itself is through self-stigma. And this is where people with mental health issues internalize the societal stereotypes that I've just mentioned, those prejudices, those negative beliefs. And when they internalize them, when they start seeing those beliefs as the real representation of who they are, they start walking around with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, low self-esteem, and also fear of seeking help when they need it. So if you are having a mental health challenge, let's say you're having depression, and people believe that when you have depression, you're unreliable and you are not going to show up when you're needed, so you should not be given jobs because you're not going to do them, When you start believing that story because the public believes it, then you will walk around with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. You're going to start thinking that there's something wrong with you as an individual, as a person, just because you have a mental health challenge. And that is self-stigma. So you start treating yourself as less. You start limiting interactions with people. You stop applying to jobs. You stop putting yourself out there. You stop telling people when you're struggling. You stop seeking help when you need help. So that is self-stigma. And that is the second way that mental health stigma manifests. The third and final way that mental health stigma manifests is through structural stigma. Structural stigma looks like the systemic policies that we have and the practices and the laws that we have in our country that disadvantage individuals with mental health conditions. And it could be anything. It could be laws that do not mandate mental health services for everyone. Laws that do not mandate that workplaces should offer mental health services to their employees. It could be any type of law. It could be any type of policy that exists that disadvantages people who are struggling with mental health issues. And I am sure there are many of them. I won't get into them, but you can already think about them from what you've seen around you. These laws, these policies, these practices that disadvantage people with mental health issues can limit the access to the resources and the opportunities that are available for people in general, and it can lead to unfair treatment. People are not given access to things. People are not given access to opportunities. People are not given access to jobs because there are no policies that protect people with mental health conditions. So that is structural stigma. Those are the three main ways that you can see mental health stigma showing up in our country as a whole. If this is something that you've seen around you, please let me know in the comments. I would like to hear what your experience has been with public stigma, self-stigma, and structural stigma. And I especially want to hear from people who are in the policy-making world. What exactly is going on when it comes to mental health? What is this problem we have that we do not have policies that protect people with mental health conditions so that they can also feel like members of our society? That's the biggest question that I have. So please tell me in the comments if you have any insight about this topic. I would be really, really interested in hearing your perspective. As I have said, when there's mental health stigma, people ordinarily stop seeking help when they need it. They isolate and they exclude themselves. They cut themselves off because they know that putting themselves out there is risky to their well-being. They also get discriminated against because if we believe that people who are mentally ill are violent, we start pushing them aside or avoiding them or not treating them as part of our community. We don't employ them. We don't encourage them to seek education opportunities. And all these things, this isolation, this discrimination, this refusal to seek help when you need it can make your mental health challenges even worse. And it can make it harder for you to recover from the mental health challenges that you're going through. Stigma all around is a huge, huge problem. It hurts all of us, individuals, families, and the society at large. And that's why we need to address mental health stigma, like for real, not the fancy performative version that we do on social media, the one that is presented only when you're talking about Mental Health Awareness Month, Suicide Prevention Month. Beyond that, we need to actually get into the thick of it and deal with the issues that really need to be dealt with. If it's policies, we need to create policies. If it's education, we need to create education. And these are things that we will talk about when we are addressing how we can curb mental health stigma, how we can reduce mental health stigma. The number one place where mental health stigma comes from in our country, especially, is our culture. We have very deep-seated beliefs that are negative about mental health. We have so many misconceptions about what mental health is. We don't have basic education around what mental health looks like, what mental health illnesses are, and how they manifest themselves. We just walk around blind to that kind of reality. When we speak about people who have mental health issues, we always use very demeaning language. We think about how in our country, calling somebody mwendawazimu is used as an insult. Yet, that is often a mental health problem. And I think right now it's even getting worse because people are using mental illnesses as placeholder terms for regular human life experiences. So people will say they are OCD because they are neat. We are using all these big clinical terms to describe regular human experiences. If that has become normalized, that everybody who is neat now is OCD, then this person who is diagnosed starts to think that there's something wrong with them. They start to wonder, if everybody else is OCD and they are managing, why am I not managing? Why am I having a difficult time? Why is everybody else seeming like they're doing okay? Am I broken? Is something so wrong with me? Is it that I cannot be helped? And so these people start now internalizing their suffering, their struggle, and as they internalize it, they start placing a lot of stigma on themselves. So you see how these things are connected. So our culture that does not understand mental health in general, and then we normalize every single thing, yet not everything needs to be normalized. When we start making sweeping labels of our regular life experiences, then the people who have actual mental health illnesses are undermined. The experiences are trivialized. The experiences are made to seem less serious. The person who has the actual clinical OCD finds it very difficult to exist in the world that has made neatness synonymous with OCD. And this is just one example. As a people, we need to get to a place where we understand that mental health illnesses need to be treated by mental health professionals. It's not a spiritual issue. You can pray, it's okay for you to pray, but if a person is having a depression, you're not going to pray for the depression to go away. You can pray for peace in your heart, for patience as you continue with treatment, for strength in your spirit, but the depression needs an intervention from a mental health professional. It could be medication, it could be therapy, it could be both, but it has to be addressed. And that is a cultural thing that we need to put out there. So our way of thinking about mental health, the way we talk about people with mental health issues, the way we talk about mental health issues in general, the way we treat our friends when they tell us that they're having mental health issues, all those things need to be addressed. All those things need to be understood. If when your friends tell you that they're struggling, your response is distancing yourself, you stop picking their calls, they will stop telling you when they're struggling. They will stop telling you when they're having a difficult time. If as a society, when people are struggling, we treat them as different, we push them away, we hide them away, or we separate ourselves from them, then they will stop telling us when they are struggling. Because it's scary when you tell people and then people walk away from you, people treat you as different, people deny you access to friendship, to love. In my opinion, that is the number one source of mental health stigma. The second source of mental health stigma is media representation. The media has immense power to shape public opinion. And this is both traditional media, kina TV, radio. When you look at the way mental health is portrayed and the people with mental illnesses are portrayed on the media, you can see how mental health conditions are sensationalized, how people are turned into caricatures, how mental health is turned into a clickbait thing. We'll see people using mental health conditions on the internet as content for them to get clicks and for them to get social media empathy. But rarely do we see mental health portrayed in its fullness when it comes to the internet in general. It's never the whole story. The media will always focus on a small part of it. It will only focus on the people who are struggling the most. It will only show you the people who have not achieved the conventional markers of success. And now the culture starts associating mental health and mental illness with total disability. If all you see on the internet and in media in general is people who have mental illnesses are always struggling, are always going through a difficult time, they never get a break, they do not have jobs, they do not have access to friendship and family and anything good in their life. If all you see on the media is portrayal of struggle and suffering and suffering and suffering and suffering when it comes to mental illness, then you automatically start associating mental illness with total disability. People believe that as long as you have a clinical diagnosis, that's it, your life is over. Just go home and live in misery because you're not going to ever succeed. You're never going to get the things that you need to get in your life. You're never going to reach your goals. You're never going to get anything good in your life because the media is always showing the people who are never catching a break. And what you see regularly becomes reality for you. And so in this way, the media continues to perpetuate the myths and the misinformation around mental health issues. It continues to perpetuate the stigma. On the internet, we continue pushing the agenda that mental illness is total disability, of which it's not true. Mental illness is not total disability. People have this very distorted view of what mental illnesses look like. And if you are diagnosed with a mental illness or somebody you know is diagnosed with a mental illness and it does not fit the version that you have been constantly exposed to. So for example, you've been exposed to the one that is a sanitized version, the one that is cleaned up, you don't understand the extreme manifestations of the mental illness. If you've been exposed to the one on the media that is total suffering, total disability, total struggle, and yours does not look like that, or somebody else's that you know does not look like that, you start to trivialize your experience or this other person's experience because it does not fit the picture you've been fed. But we need to understand that with mental health and mental illnesses, they look different on different people for different types of reasons. Everybody has their own way that it manifests. And that's why we need to be more open-minded when we are viewing mental health issues. And we need to start portraying mental illnesses more accurately in their reality, the way they look like, without trying to dress them up or to turn them into a sensationalization feast of some sort. So those are the two main areas where, in my opinion, mental health stigma comes from. And I hope you can see how they feed each other. The lack of education and awareness when it comes to mental health in general in our country is just so scary. People don't know mental health conditions well enough. They don't understand their causes. They don't understand their manifestations. And they don't understand the experiences of those affected by mental illnesses. Ordinarily, this leads to a lot of fear in the public. Again, it's what I was saying. If you think that all people with mental illnesses are violent, then you walk around feeling very afraid of meeting somebody who says they have a mental illness. This lack of awareness, this lack of education, this lack of knowledge about mental health and mental health conditions leads to a lot of prejudice and misconceptions, as you've said, and I hope I've made it a little bit clearer on how these things manifest themselves. When people are uninformed about mental health in general, they are more likely to stigmatize those people with mental health conditions. So they don't offer support, they don't offer understanding, they perpetuate the stigma, they perpetuate the prejudice, the discrimination, because they don't know any better. They don't know anything about mental health. They don't know anything else about mental health illnesses. So if you as an individual, you believe that all mentally ill people are dangerous, and they are not, let me be the one to tell you that, then you're less likely to seek help when you are diagnosed with a mental health condition yourself. And you're also less likely to provide support to a loved one or a friend who needs it when they are diagnosed with a mental illness as well. It's twofold like that. And that's why we need to deal with mental health stigma completely. We need to eradicate mental health stigma. Stigma makes people shut down. People learn to pretend to be okay when they are suffering. People will continue living with a lot of shame around their illness when there's a lot of help that is available. People continue to pretend that they're okay. They don't seek the help they need. They continue to suffer, and they're suffering unnecessarily. And this is how we are creating a culture where mental illness is a taboo topic. When you're suffering, you suffer in silence. When you are diagnosed, you hide in shame. You do not tell people. You do not tell anybody. You continue to struggle. And yet, there's a lot of help. When we look at it from the outside, we keep wondering, why is it there are so many mental health professionals who are unemployed, who could be offering mental health services, but then there are no clients to come and get these mental health services? Kumbe, it's because the culture we have created is a lot of shame, a lot of taboo around mental illness. People don't seek help, people don't seek support. So that is how ordinarily I look at this issue of mental health stigma. This is how I look at the issue of mental health, mental illnesses, and the stigma around it in our country. Now that I have brought this up, I'm hoping you're going to start to notice the ways in which mental health stigma perpetuates, the way it shows up, the way it manifests. Start to ask yourself, in your workplace, is there a structural stigma when it comes to mental illness? In the school you go to, have you noticed structural stigma? The systemic policies that exist, are they stigmatizing to people who have mental illnesses? Start to look at the communities that you belong to. What public stigma exists? What do the people around you believe about mental health? What do the people around you believe about mental illness? Listen to your friends when they speak. Listen to your family members when they speak. Listen to your colleagues when they speak on a personal level. How do they use mental health language? What are the things that they say? How do they say them? How do they describe the people who are struggling with mental illness? What are some of the words that they use? Why do you think they use those words instead of other words? Start to listen to people on social media when they talk about mental illness and mental health issues in general. What do they say? Your favorite accounts on TikTok, your favorite accounts on Instagram, what are some of the words they use to describe mental illnesses? And even beyond that, do you notice them using clinical terms to describe regular human experiences? How are mental health conversations had in your circles? Those are questions I want you to ask yourself. I want you to think deeply about this, because this issue of mental health stigma is not going to go away on its own. It needs all of us to be involved. And even if you do not have a mental illness, that has been diagnosed by a mental health professional does not mean that you will never get one. Even if in your family nobody has a mental illness, it does not mean that somebody will never get one. I want you to pay attention to the people around you. Just today, the accounts you follow on social media, the people you listen to on the podcast you listen to, the YouTube channels you listen to, the news you watch on TV, the books that you read, the people you hang out with, your family members, how do they talk about mental health? And you will start to notice the places where stigma is still very much rampant. And even you yourself, ask yourself, when you think about mental health, what are some of the things that come to your mind? When you think about mental illnesses, what are some of the things that come to your mind? How do you describe mental health? How do you describe mental illnesses? How do you describe people who have mental illnesses? How do you treat them? When somebody tells you that they have been diagnosed with depression, what is your first reaction? What do you think about their future? What do you think about the experience? What do you think about how their life is going to change? How do you think about how your relationship with them is going to change? These are some questions that you can ask yourself. In the next episode, we'll be talking about how to reduce mental health stigma. I have 5 points. I have 5 points on how to reduce mental health stigma. And I hope you'll get to join me and listen to that episode. It will be in the description box. Please check it out. If you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, anything of any sort, any feedback, I love to hear it. Please leave it in the comment section or wherever you're listening this to. I am sure there's a comment section there. Please leave your comments there. And share this with a friend. Share this with a family member. Be the conversation starter in your circles. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself and take care of your mental health.